And we're back. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
This is footnote number 21,
Damn.
February of 2019. We've come a long way.
Look at us go.
I just realized in our meeting minutes,
Yep.
it still says 2018. So I'm going to change
Oh,
that. We
yeah. We're
never,
not we're not up with the times.
no, we're still stuck in the past.
Just we'll work on it.
All right, June.
Yeah.
New month, new you. What's been
Yeah.
going on in this past week?
You know what? Yeah, I feel like I am a new me.
Really?
Yeah. So I've done a couple things differently since last week. So one of the things I've started doing is I've started setting habit goals for myself. So in my like reflection document, I'll write down at the beginning of the week or the end of the week something like how I would like to change for the next week.
Mm.
And so, for the first week, I outlined a couple of different goals. So I wanted to switch up or streamline my morning ritual so that it gets me up and gets me going with a sense of momentum in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I did a similar thing with my night ritual. Um, and then some other goals to go along with that. One of them was looking into like finding a therapist because I think uh, I wanted the chance to explore my emotions a little bit more in depth. And I think everyone could benefit from a kind of inner emotional work.
Mm.
It's everyone's filled with such kinks and little wounds, and no, kink is not the right word.
No, it's not.
Wound, like you know, scars that you've paper cuts and deeper wounds that people have picked up as
Mm.
they've grown older.
Well, they have kinks too, It's
Yeah, I didn't mean it that in that way, but so those are a few of my goals among like a few other ones. And every night, I kind of come back to it. I update it. I can kind of see what kind of progress I'm making towards each habit, and I'm continuing that this week. And so far, it's been great. My morning feels a lot smoother. I'm out of bed and like I have my keto bulletproof coffee protein shake in my hand
Mm.
within like 20, 30 minutes. And then I can get the day going. So I'm happy about that. One other thing that's changed for the positive for me is I've really embraced the idea of flipping the script. So that's something I brought up last week. So when you're up against a problem or a challenge that's really draining you, that you feel like there's no clear solution to, you have a rapid switch in perspective that allows you to overcome it. So let me give you an example. So I was getting really tired of studying for med school. Just really sick and tired of it. I felt like, you know, maybe I used this analogy last week, but if I had to describe it to like eating food, it'd be like I'm trying to stuff down like three like oven baked, like super dry chicken breasts like down my throat one after the other. It's a disgusting feeling.
Mm.
And some people say maybe studying in med school should feel like that because it's like drinking out of a fire hose. So you know I was so what burnt out by that method of studying and thinking I might have to grind like this, but then I remembered that idea of like flipping perspectives and saying, well, no, I'm not going to let the medical school curriculum dictate how and what I learn, right? Or maybe it wasn't dictating anything at all, but it was just my self-enforced illusion or something like that that made it feel like I had to study in order to satisfy my like tutor and group mates expectations or whatever, or that I had to like, so in our group we set objectives and they're kind of like numbered off, or that like I have to study like sequentially in a linear order, like A, B, C, D, E, check mark, check mark, check mark. So like I was getting very frustrated. So I decided to kind of take my own learning into my own hands and ask like, okay, what would actually make this enjoyable and engaging for me? Like, what is it that I'm missing? So like, and that is a kind of flipping the script. It's like, I'm gonna take ownership for what I'm learning. I'm not gonna just keep on complaining endlessly about how med school is too hard or there's too much to learn. So so I did that, and then I started thinking about some ways to help. So one of the things that really helped me is before every case that we cover, I find a YouTube video of a patient story, and that person becomes kind of like my reference point. When at any point in the thing I'm questioning, okay, what am I studying like osteoporosis for? Like who's this for? And then I think about Lana, the 60-year-old like sweet lady, who couldn't dance anymore because she had osteoporosis. But after getting the right screening and treatment, she got back to like learning cello and dancing and like doing her garden. And I was like, it's a story that sticks. Like, it's been 5 days since I watched that video, but like it stuck with me. So that's I formed that kind of cornerstone for my learning. And then I've done some different things to chop up my notes different, format it nicely so that it's more recognizable and I'll have a better time reviewing it. I'm trying to summarize the information more into simpler terms and formatting it so that the summaries are very clear. So little things like that, and also taking it at my own pace. And because what I think I've learned is that when you're enjoying and in a groove with what you're doing, that's when you're learning best. So with those kind of few principles, I'm trying to flip the script on my learning. And for the first week, it's been great.
That's awesome. I'm zoomed in right now to just see your face again. I can still see my face. I'm still working with this.
All right.
But I've also been working with similar problems this week and the last week as well. As you know, like our school is very like traditional. We have a lot of lectures. We learn a lot of content, and we're just inundated with content all the time. And so I do still attend lecture, but I don't intend to take a lot from it. It's just like initial exposure. And then I go off and then I read reference material that I think better structures the information in a way that I can understand. And especially if it's much easier with written text to pick out the points that like click with me and actually can be assimilated into my already existing knowledge base so that I can actually build a foundational I can build a foundation for which my knowledge can be layered on. So I try to work on a sort of this concept of first principles, right? You go for the most basic information possible first, and then you build up and add more information. So for example, we're doing a cardio block right now and learning about aortic stenosis. So you go and you see a lecture on aortic stenosis, and these doctors who know so much about it tell you all this clinical information and give you like dosages of medications to give and like all these complications, and they never even explain what aortic stenosis actually is. They never even define it. They never say it's like a blockage or like a narrowing of the aortic valve or anything like that. They never say that. So you kind of have to like piece it together from this hyper specific information, which isn't helpful at all. So for me, it's been good to, like you said, to go at my own pace and to start with the most fundamental information that there is, and then to work up in my own way to build a more solid, sturdy base of knowledge. Take a shot for every time I say knowledge base and rant there.
Yeah. And any other things you've changed from your week, Paul?
Well, something that I've been also working with is this idea of rituals. So Two things have always been a challenge for me. Number one is finding a good way to memorize things and to like enhance my memory. And that's for like, medicine, generally speaking. And the second thing is regulating mood. So I find that, I have a lot of ups and downs, and I want to be at a place where I can be able to sort of control my mood, or at least influence it in the way that I want to. Something that I think links the two is this idea of rituals. So I mentioned this like weeks and weeks ago. I think a lot of the time my mood is influenced by very recent events and very recent memories, or memories that are currently in my my, what do you call it? Like my
consciousness.
My consciousness, yeah. And so if I trigger the appropriate memories, then I can almost trigger the mood that I want. So, you watch a movie, right? And the movie is like this series of events, basically like a memory that lays out what you should be feeling and what you should be thinking about. And you're just receiving that information, and as sort of this vessel for this flow of information, you're intaking and interpreting what's coming at you, and you feel those emotions, right? So I think of this as applicable to any situation. So, in the case of medicine, for example, you brought up the idea of I forgot what her name was already, but your old grandmother with osteoporosis. Obviously not impactful to me, apparently. But thinking about that video, right? That video represents a certain series of memories and events that elicit a certain mood in you, and that's an inspiring thing. It makes you want to. It reminds you of why you got into medicine, right?
Right.
So, in line with that, I've been working this week to try to determine, okay, so what sort of rituals can I have? And rituals would be a specific sequence of events / memories that would reliably bring out a certain mood. So what kind of rituals can I do, let's say in the morning, or whenever I'm feeling exhausted, or whenever I'm feeling a boost, to help me do whatever I need to do at the moment? So one of the one thing that I've done this week, and it's been hard to figure out a good system, but I'm still working on it. The one thing that I did was I'm working with my Google Assistant, the Hey Google.
Yeah.
Turned on. Sorry. Working with that, you can program it to have routines.
Yeah.
I don't know if you tried that. But essentially, I programmed in like a small meditation thing. So when I say, hey Google, hey Google, it's time to recenter, then it walks me through like a 1-minute meditation where it's like, okay, take a deep breath, take account of your thoughts, notice what you're feeling in your body, release your tensions, etc., etc. And then it plays like the sound of an ocean for like 10 minutes. It's pretty cool. But every time I go through that, I'm reminded of number one, why I made that routine, which is to get me back into this like sort of centered centered being. I don't know. It just brings me back to where I am in the moment. And it also just gets me to think about, what's going on, and like why I'm feeling anxious, or why I'm feeling distracted. And again, it just facilitates my attention back to the moment. So, okay, so rituals, as I explained, it seems just like meditation, but I'm sure there's other ways of making rituals that also that don't necessarily involve like meditation or meditative thought. A morning routine, for example, could be a great ritual to get you started in the day and to get you feeling like you can take on the day, right? So that's the sort of stuff that I've been working with this week.
Okay. Can I clarify like what the purpose of the ritual is? It's to, so the Google centering ritual is to be more mindful of the moment. But like, is there a more general like goal you're trying to achieve with these rituals, or more specific goals?
I think for the centering goal, um, the centering routine, sorry, it's whenever I feel overwhelmed or
Yeah.
I feel like I'm stretched and there's a lot of tension in my brain. Like there's a lot of things that I've been taking in that I haven't processed. A lot of emotions, just raw emotions that have built up. A lot of things that I've been tolerating.
Right.
So because that causes a bunch of tension in my body and my mind, I just want to kind of decompress essentially. So the point of that routine is to just, yeah, it's basically a mindfulness routine, right? It's get you back into the moment and to let go of the things that are bothering you.
Okay. But yeah, one thing I'm curious about is what are the kind of things that are making the tension build up in the first place? So like when you do those 1 minute meditations, like where is commonly the source of those tensions?
Mm. It comes from a lot of different places, right? Oftentimes it has to do with recently more noticeably I've been feeling it with certain people that I'm around. And like I don't know how to be non-specific about this, but I think I get annoyed by things that some people do, right? So this happens all the time to a lot of people. People don't always follow your expectations, and they do things that sort of tick you off, essentially. And when those pile up, right, you sort of lose sense of why you're mad because you tend to just like dismiss as like, oh, whatever, just forget it, just move on. But you're not really addressing those issues at their root cause. You're not like confronting them. You're not fixing the problem. You're just swallowing it. And because a lot of people are usually pretty agreeable, like me, they don't realize, hey, this is really getting to me, and this is piling up.
Yeah.
So this decompression routine, this centering routine, is sort of to clear that cache,
Right.
and get rid of all the things that are piling up.
Right. See, I think so. I've started reading a book on emotion today, so
Okay.
I'm sure we can talk about more about the theory behind it next week. But just from my own thoughts, I think there is that kind of cache that really builds up, that emotional tension, when you don't allow yourself to express whatever it is you're feeling into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, we can put on a different mask when we want or when we think we need to. So if someone ticks you off, I don't know, maybe it might not make any noticeable changes to your facial expression or tone.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been thinking, like, maybe it is better if you let that show in controlled amounts and controlled doses. And I think that's like an art form that we're not really well trained in, right? So I don't think, we really stress the value of material intelligence or just general intelligence in school, but not emotional intelligence, right? So imagine a situation where you and that annoying person in your life were, just fully emotionally competent, fully realized human beings, right? And so if the other person did something that annoyed you or stepped on a boundary of yours, then how you might respond as like a fully competent being would be like maybe you'd have this weird shudder in your like, I don't know, right eyebrow, or they'd be like tiny micro facial expression change or posture change that the other person would be receptive to, and maybe then they could ask like, hey, what's up, like, was it what I said before? And then you could have that mutual process of dialogue, if both parties are willing to let their emotions show, and that requires a degree of vulnerability. but we're not like that. So most times we don't express those emotions, or even when we do in subtle ways, other people don't seem to pick up or notice, and they don't know how to act. And I think it's a sign of maybe a not very emotionally intelligent society. So the one of the solutions to that cache filling up problem of emotional tension, I think, has to be being more natural about expressing what wants to be expressed, because those emotions serve a function, and they're a language of their own. They're like a kind of proto language, right? That's the language of emotions is what like mammals would use to communicate, because they can't use literal language, and that has very powerful messages that it sends, and that can be understood intuitively. We just need to learn the language.
Mm-hmm. I strongly agree, and I guess the only hesitation that I have is, first of all, I wanna talk about the point that you made about the emotionally, what would you call it, like low EQ society. Is that sort of the thing you're suggesting? Like a society, I guess, that doesn't value emotional intelligence that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel like, yeah, like people just ignore, or try not to take ownership for emotions. So,
Mm-hmm.
or emotional language. So, what specifically I'm thinking of is there's some people that I think do receive that emotional language, and do receive that emotional information from me or from other people, but they actively choose to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps because it's too burdensome. It's too much to actually act upon. Because imagine you're the most sensitive human being in the world, and
Right.
you could take any emotional cue and you could interpret it. That would be extremely burdensome for you, right? Because you'd always get this. You'd be getting all this verbiage from people who
Right.
aren't even talking to you, and you'd feel compelled to respond to it.
And you'd pick up a lot of like false positives, false negatives too.
Right.
Because
So that's the complexity of it.
yeah.
Um, and so I think because of that, especially, people are less likely to act on emotional cues. It's like a lot of people would just be like, "Oh yeah, like maybe they were sad, maybe they were happy. I'm too busy, or that's way too much for me to handle, so I'm just gonna ignore it and move on." And I almost think that that is a healthier option in a lot of situations,
Right.
because it just kind of gets us moving. We'll forget about it anyway a lot of the time, right? Like 90% of the time, I think we just move on and forget. But maybe it's those few moments where emotional language is very, very important,
Mm-hmm.
or these emotional cues are very important that we need to attend to. And again, we need to decide which emotional cue is important.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need to prioritize.
Right. And that's not, yeah, I agree with that kind of sensitivity and vagueness problem, right? Just emotional cues, like if I make like a weird facial expression right now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it could be because there's like something on your face, or maybe there's like a weird bug on your wall, like it could be a million things.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about us and our capacities for self-reflection and all these things are that we can, be in tune with our emotional state. If something rises up, then we can kind of ask, like, why is that happening? And then if I can get a more clear-cut answer, then I can express it in a more coherent and specific way to other people. And I think that's when emotions become useful, right? So when I am feeling annoyed, like, how am I going to express that discontent? Like, is it going to be right at the moment? Am I going to freak out and say like, what the fuck, dude? Or is there a smarter way? Is there like, afterwards could I talk with that person and say like how you like I was wondering what you meant by whatever you said there, and try to tease it apart. Like it's so difficult, and it might feel so awkward because people aren't used to it, or people have lost touch with the art of communicating in that way. But I think we need to reclaim it.
Mm-hmm. So just to like sort of maybe sum up, it's not just important to be like to have high EQ, but maybe to have better emotional vocabulary that we can use to communicate with people,
Right.
so that we're better understood, and we also get the what what is that feeling that you get when you express something emotionally? What would you classify that as? Like satisfaction or
Satisfaction, fulfillment. See, like,
fulfillment?
right now we're struggling to find the words to describe our emotional states.
Right.
you know, if a very left brain way to say something like that would be like, oh, when you said that, my heart rate went up by 10 beats per minute, and then my temperature rose by 0.4. But the reason we have like metaphors and that kind of artful or tasteful language is so that we can more easily convey our whatever we're experiencing to other people. So yeah, I think music, different and different ways to convey, through language or through whatever it is, even through your body posture. I think that's why something like acting can be so like powerful to learn about. Like maybe can you overact and exaggerate your annoyance at someone just to make the point clear to them? Maybe if you're an experienced actor, you could do that, and you could play at the level that your audience needs. So there's all these different ways of conveying emotion, and I think when you express it, it kind of signals to the emotional parts of your brain, like your limbic system, that like, yes, your concerns and needs have been acknowledged. You don't need to be tense and freak out anymore.
That's really interesting. I realize now, like reflecting, I don't try to express my emotions in anything else but words. Or like the first response that I have when I'm feeling something is to try to conceptualize it into words.
Right.
And maybe that contributes to part of the frustration. Maybe like what I really need to do is try to express it abstractly, as I'm trying to like express it through words right now. But somehow like showcase the emotion, not necessarily through words, but through other means. I don't know. Actually, I don't know any other languages that I could speak through, that I'm comfortable enough to express emotions without feeling like they're going to be improperly received. Like they're imprecise for sure, but maybe they hold more meaning because they're imprecise.
Yeah, exactly. And when you have a combination of these different aspects, so you say you don't have other languages to convey your emotions, but I disagree with that, right? So if you take a more broad perspective on what languages are, a way to communicate just whatever, then your body language, well, it's part of the word, it's a language,
right?
Your body language, your tone and your rhythm, I think all those paint a bigger picture, help you paint a bigger picture of what your emotional state is at the moment and why. And your words and the imagery you evoke to describe them, those are kind of like just the cherry on top, like the whipped cream and cherry to complete that whole picture, to make it super clear. But Yeah, I think that's why music is so powerful, right? If you can find the right music that really resonates with what you're feeling at the moment, and then that can be such a powerful moment of acknowledgement and release. It's like, wow, I didn't know how to put these into words before, but this dude did it on Spotify. Thanks, good for him.
Yeah.
Um, and and also, music is that language. Music is a way to communicate emotion. Like even without words, if you just, if your room is fairly well sound insulated, maybe you can just cry your emotions. What that feels like. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not very well insulated. So I've been told. But yeah, I do. I have moments. I have phases in my life. I don't know if you have these too, where there's like one or two songs that I can just sing on repeat
Yeah.
for like weeks on end because they keep touching at a certain idea, a certain memory or emotion. That's I guess like that hasn't been resolved yet,
Right.
right? And like every time you sing that song or every time you listen to that song, it's like it reminds you of it, but it also gets you closer to resolving
Right.
those issues.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Like a quote or a saying like popped into my mind. I think like emotions demand to be felt.
Hmm.
Like that's kind of what the sensation is like. It's like demanding like please like I'm trying to get your attention. There's something going on. Please attend to me. It's like you have a kid that's like pestering you. He's crying, but like you don't know why.
Hmm.
But when you start attending to it, maybe even if you're not speaking, sometimes it just resolves. Yeah, so
Hmm.
we'll continue our study of emotions, and I'll send you a link of that book.
Yeah, let me.
$100 on Kindle. You can
Oh,
you can buy it on Amazon and then load it onto your phone Kindle app.
great. This
Uh,
is not a sponsor for the book. Um, a plug-in. I I'm also wondering now, like, what sort of rituals I want to start as well, because it'd be cool. I don't know, like to have some sort of ritual where you could sit down, do a bunch of things, get into a comfortable state, and then just like feel all the emotions that you need to
yeah,
for that time.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I wouldn't even know where to start. I don't know.
yeah. I think that's a very like useful meditation strategy or method.
Mm,
I guess the most classic meditation is to focus on your breathing and just to focus on that and to kind of let go of whatever thoughts come your way. And I think there's a very strong rationale for that too, in terms of honing your attention and not and bringing and centering your attention.
mm,
But I think there's also a need to let yourself engage with what it is that you're feeling. Um, so, like for example, today I was up fairly early in the morning, and then I started my morning routine. There was like a party the night before, so I was like cleaning up a little bit. And then 2 hours into it, I was getting more and more tired as I was slowing down. I wasn't being as responsive to the music I was playing. So, like, I recognized, like, okay, my body's tired. Let's go to my bedroom. And then, at first, like, I was kind of tossing and turning, wondering, like, if I'm so tired, why can't I sleep? But then I kind of brought my attention back to my body and really try to like feel what the body was feeling. And is
mm.
I started noticing the little aches more and more. And then I felt my body kind of relaxing more and more. And then I eventually fell asleep. It's so weird because before I was trying to fall asleep, I was kind of tossing and turning, not knowing what was making me uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But then I turned my attention to the actual source of the discomfort, and then that helped me resolve it.
Mm.
So I love that idea of having the space to engage with your emotions and other bodily signals.
Bodily signals. We do ignore a lot of our own bodily signals. I definitely agree. Even as I'm sitting here, I just realized my shoulders are incredibly tense. I
Right.
don't know why, but just trying to relax them now. I might fall asleep on you right now. Uh, anyway, let's keep moving. Anything else that's been going on in your life? Switch it up a bit. Flip
Yeah.
flip the script.
Yeah. I've finished my 2 books on relationship advice that I've been talking about.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, I very highly recommend, especially the second one. I talked about it a little last week. It's called Models by Mark Manson,
Mm-hmm.
and it's part of the place where I got the idea about flipping the script, because one of the biggest things that it talked about was neediness, and
Mm-hmm.
how neediness fundamentally is the most unattractive quality in males. So like if you're coming from a position of need, saying I need a certain person to fulfill these parts of my life, even if that's true, that's going to come off as very weak and unattractive to like whoever it is that you're approaching. um, because from the other perspective, you you don't want that. You want someone who is like fairly, let's say, stable, or
Mm-hmm.
how one of the ways that like females can judge, like in general, like status, or let's say competence, is by how non-needy like the male is, right?
Mm-hmm.
In like a classic heterosexual relationship, like you say, if that guy is at the top of the male hierarchy or near the top, then like most of his needs should be taken care of because he's doing well. And like he probably has his choice of females. So like it's not a need issue, it's a choice issue. Right? So there's that flipping of the script there, where you go from a position of need to a position of choice, and like I'm pursuing this because I want to, not because I need it. Right. So there were a lot of statements like that really kind of flicked the switch for me. Like, yeah, like you don't need a certain person to fulfill the like needs in your life. Like the way you should conceptualize when you see like a very attractive person is not, oh my God, I wonder if I'll be good enough for that person. No, you flip the script and say, I wonder if that person will be good for me. Right? Like it's a very, very subtle shift, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it's so powerful because it places you in a different position and frame of mind, where you say like I'm enough. Like I'm the real deal. I'm a full package. And like whoever can be with me would be like lucky to have me. Right? It's now this can get like very narcissistic, right? If you kind of leave it unchecked. But if you can have a realistic perspective on who you are and what value you offer to people, then I think it's very easy to really have faith and believe in that flipped perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I've been really like it's been a huge learning moment for me. You got to flip the script, because there's a lot of scripts that are running in here that need to be flipped. That maybe it served me better to be in need mode before, when I needed to climb and get more and more and more. But maybe I can flip that now.
That last point is kind of interesting because I wanted to tell you something like this is all like sort of has to do with perception, right? It's regardless of whether or not you are actually like worthwhile. It's how you perceive yourself. And so in that case, like really anyone can feel this way if they appropriately I guess change the way they think, or they're able to set up the circumstances so that they can have these sort of thoughts.
Right.
I've lost my train of thought, but what was I saying right before this? I'm having a little bit of trouble.
So it seems to be just related to, if it's so simple, why doesn't everyone do it? If like being the most attractive and non-needy person in the world just depends on you flipping your perspective, why doesn't everyone do it? And I think you brought up a part of that answer, which is your circumstances and like how you're doing in your own life. That's going to influence the way you think, right? So you can't be in like, the dirtiest room, like unemployed, like, I don't know, 30 something in your mom's basement, like whatever, and then just decide to embody this switch in perspective and say, oh, I'm the best man out there, and any girl would be lucky to have me. And because it doesn't line up with reality. I don't think it's just a flip in the perspective. It's something that can happen when you decide to live your life in a certain way and you feel comfortable in your identity, and when you've worked so that you're at a certain place in your life, you have a certain amount of experience, you are at a certain level of status or like standing in society, and when you begin to more closely identify with those, then I think making that perceptual switch, going from a position of need to a position of want and agency, that becomes possible.
Right. So it's wow. Words are very difficult today.
Yeah.
It's sort of this cycle, right? You either change your attitude or you change your behavior, or you change both at the same time. The attitude is how you value yourself,
Right.
and the behavior is making yourself valuable.
Right.
And so one leads to the other, and they sort of feed back on each other. And as long as you stay in that loop, you're in a good place. Yeah. And so going back to what you said at the very end, which was, God, I literally just had it in my head.
Vaguely describe it. What kind of idea was I getting at?
My goodness, I don't even remember. I've also been studying for like 2 days straight.
You're right.
Like EKGs and stuff. So I can tell you about the P wave. So I'm having a little difficulty. I apologize.
Yeah. No
Sometimes
worries.
we have these moments,
Yeah.
You can't make 21 perfect podcasts.
Well, okay. Let me pick up on the feedback idea, and you can let me know if that flashes in your mind again. Like that's such a good point. It's like, which one came first? Like, it doesn't matter. They're part of the same process, and it's such a powerful positive. It can be such a powerful positive reinforcement loop. Yep. Good self-perception, so your behaviors change. Because your behaviors change, your life changes, so your self-perception changes more. And it's like, it can be a rapidly very positive and generative cycle. And who knows where that can take you? Because like that kind of growth, positive feedback loop can be an exponential growth curve. Now, like I've been thinking about what are the limitations to that, like, or what limitations stop people from getting to that place where they can start building on that positive feedback loop. I was wondering if you had any ideas.
I do have a few that come to mind. So like we don't exist in isolation, right? So we get a lot of feedback from other people,
Right.
and a lot of people tell us their value judgments on us, whether or not they're aware they're making these judgments, right?
Right.
So like you, for example, let's say you put on a nice little outfit and like you feel really confident and you go outside
Right.
and you're sort of expecting people to be like, hey, wow, that looks nice on you, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And if you get no responses, you might start doubting yourself, right?
Right.
Or people might be even more explicit. They might be like, oh wow, that's a cool scarf. And like judging from their nonverbals, you could be like, you could realize that they're not really into what you're wearing, right?
Right.
So in the broader context of things, like you get feedback from other people as to your value,
Right.
and like it's inescapable, and it affects your mentality, your attitude, and therefore it also affects your behavior.
Right.
And another thing, like the idea of accruing more value for yourself,
Right.
that's not the easiest thing to do, right? Like just because you have this attitude or mentality doesn't mean things are going to go the way that you want it to.
Right.
So I think the idea that I kind of wanted to get at that I forgot about is that you're sort of limited to what you already are, what you already have.
Uh-huh.
Having this mentality sort of allows you to maximize what you already have, but it doesn't give you more per se. Does that make sense? So let's say you're like in numbers, you're an 8 out of 10 guy, but you think you're 6 out of 10.
Uh-huh.
This sort of mentality will get you to feeling like and being like an 8 out of 10 guy, but you're not going to be anymore because that's just the value that you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's entirely true.
Mm-hmm. That's how I perceive it.
Right, because the thing about value is that like value is in a way subjective, but also objective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we like the idea of putting ceilings on ourselves or limitations, saying like, okay, like there are other geniuses and other really brilliant people out there, but like I'm not at that level. Like when I fully realize my potential, it probably wouldn't be like Einstein or something, right? So we have these sneaky ways of limiting ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that's very healthy, and it'll keep you from becoming delusional or narcissistic. But sometimes, a lot of the times, I don't think they're in touch with like reality. And what I mean by that is, you know, I've gone on rants before on this podcast about like how the human body is the most like intricate thing in the universe, right? It's like, Paul, imagine you lived in a city. Like, how many people are in the city like that we live? Like, the biggest city we know, like in our vicinity, is like Toronto. And let's say that has, I don't know how many million people, 4 or 5
I'm
million
gonna search it
people.
up right now.
Yeah, yeah. If you could search it up.
Keep going.
Yeah. So it has like maybe 5 million people,
2.7 million people.
2.7 million people living in the city.
Uh-huh.
You look at the city and say like, holy shit, that's a big city. There's so much shit going on, and yeah, the things that this city and the people in it could accomplish is like, yeah, off the charts.
Mm.
And that's at one level of complexity, right? At that order of magnitude. Now, the thing about your body is that it's like a city, but it's built of 1.7 trillion residents. So that's like, you know, a lot of orders of magnitude above like the complexity of a city.
Mm.
and then you go to your brain, and then your brain is the most fascinating and least understood thing in the entire universe. And the degree of complexity and potential that it holds is limitless. And I think that's the kind of religious ideas that, you know, ancient people express in their artwork and things like that. There's, you know, one maybe more recent example is of Michelangelo's painting in the Sistine Chapel where Adam meets God. And some neuroanatomists who've been like looking and performing surgery on the brain, like neurosurgeons, for like 30 years at the most prestigious institutions, one day look at it and say like, oh, like that portrayal of God coming from the heavens to meet fingers with Adam, that's like a perfectly anatomically accurate description of the human brain. And you can even see like there's a Scientific American article about this saying that like although Michelangelo is an absolute master of this art, and in every other portion of his painting, the lighting reflects like what it would be like in reality. But in the brain, it's off. And you can't say that was a mistake, right? Because Master Michelangelo, like maybe one of the greatest painters on earth, is not going to make that rookie mistake. Like, it was probably intentional. And so, like that, I think there's many ways of pointing or alluding to the divinity and limitless potential of the human mind and human soul. And that's like an incredibly powerful idea, right? So that's like very fundamentally something that I believe in. And that's something that's been orienting my life, like maybe from like in the past year, and more so I realize it's truth. So part of me gets very frustrated when people will voluntarily put ceilings on what they can do without really fully realizing the kind of thing that they are. It took 13.4 billion years of trial and error and biological evolution, and you know, it's just like that to create this this whole thing. And you should be so excited to live in it. It's like the most advanced spaceship that you'll ever get to be the captain of. And you know, better not waste this opportunity. So I mean, that was a June spiritual rant, but I think we shouldn't limit ourselves in those ways. But also you got to stay grounded and say
be humble.
Be humble and say like, okay, I have a lot of potential. I get it, but I'm not there yet. Just keep grinding out away, you know, at the level you're at right now, and see where things go. See where life takes you. And yeah,
I think that is a highlight reel right there.
Yeah,
it's super inspirational. I don't ever think of the mind as this limitless thing, and that's why you and I are so different. We have such like different perspectives, right? But I still have a lot of optimism in terms of what people can do.
Right.
I guess what drives me isn't so much that, you know, our minds are limitless. It's that we are limited, but we still find ways to persevere.
Right.
I think those are two sides of the same coin, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's founded on hope for mankind, and the things that we can accomplish, right? I think just to give like a counterpoint or a counter perspective, it is a lot more, I would say it's a lot more pragmatic to think that we are limited,
right,
and that we can push the boundary as much as we can. But we, in terms of like religious terms, I guess we're still, we will never be gods. We will never get to a point of being this infinite being with infinite will and infinite capability. But even in that, there's a lot of meaning and fulfillment to be had in trying to approximate or get close to that as much as possible, even though we know we have our limits.
Yeah. And like in calculus, where you approach a limit to, like, let's say x-axis number 1, it's like
x approaches 1.
Yeah, it's like, okay, there's like an infinite number of points, like, yeah, in theory, heading up to 1, so you'll never get to 1, but somehow you get to 1.
Right.
It's weird. It's that gap is limitless, but also like that limit exists, and I don't know. I'm not in tune with calculus enough to do more justice to that idea, but that's just to express there's a weird paradox. The limited and the limitless coexist, and it forms a kind of harmonious relationship. So, that's why we're friends, Paul.
Why? Because you're the infinite and I'm the finite?
No, not that. We take those perspectives. We're slightly more inclined to take different perspectives in those ways. And I read a good quote from Carl Sagan, and it's something like, in science and discovery, you need both openness to the most absurd and ridiculous ideas, but also the scrutiny and specificity of, like, the highest degree. And those two together are what produce, like, remarkable scientific discoveries, right? So, you need to think in, like, that kind of limitless, unhindered, and completely open term, but you also need to know how to think in that kind of surgeon-like, precise, and incredibly skeptical and solid terms. And those two working together is what produces, I don't know, truth.
Wow, it's a fun idea. I think it's amazing. I recount the 21 or so footnotes that we've had, and a lot of them have this central theme, right? This is our first episode. I think it was on the left and right brain, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that also sort of touches on this idea as well, this chaos and order, and fascinating. Yeah. Will we ever get to any sort of conclusion? I wonder.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll do some, like, Dragon Ball Z fusion thing. We'll become one person.
This should be called the Left and Right Podcast. Honestly.
Okay.
Change it up.
Yeah.
Rebranding.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's
good.
I think that's good for this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to all the viewers. So many viewers. Thanks for not watching the Super Bowl and tuning in with us.
That's true. Yeah. I'm sure the Patriots won. Anyways.
You cut out there, but.
Oh, okay. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.